Our country has adequate deposits of coltan. And for those of us who are not technical, coltan is a mineral which is responsible for your communication gadgets, the cameras you are using, the phones you are using, the laptops, and any other communication material. Coltan is a key mineral that facilitates those particular gadgets.
A shocking discovery beneath Kenya's soil has the world watching. A massive reserve of coltan, the mineral powering your phone, your laptop, and the entire digital age. Could this black gold launch Kenya into a new era of wealth and power? Or will it trigger a global scramble? Let's dive in. But what if this incredible discovery isn't a blessing, but a curse in disguise? What if the story of prosperity, repeated by politicians and hopeful headlines, is just a cover for a new, smarter chapter of foreign exploitation? What if this mountain of black gold is destined to leave behind nothing but poisoned land, broken promises, and communities that are poorer than when they started? The story of resource wealth in Africa is too often written in blood, sweat, and tears. It's a story of plunder, not prosperity. And as the world's powers turn their hungry eyes toward Kenya's newfound treasure, the patterns of the past are emerging with chilling clarity. Today, we expose how foreign powers are already positioning themselves to loot Kenya's future. We'll unravel the blueprint for the theft, a plan perfected over decades in the ravaged hills of the Congo. And we'll ask the most important question of all: can Kenya break the coltan curse before it consumes another African nation? The announcement, when it came in early 2024, was electrifying. After extensive surveys, Kenya's Minister for Mining, Salim Mvurya, confirmed the presence of coltan. Not just trace amounts, but deposits spread across 6 counties, including Embu, Samburu, and Turkana. Suddenly, Kenya was on the global mining map. But it's important to be clear: the government is still assessing if these deposits are actually economically viable. The full scope isn't known yet, but the potential has put everyone on notice. So, what is coltan anyway? Its full name is columbite tantalite, a dull, black metallic ore. But when you process it, you extract 2 critical elements: niobium and, most importantly, tantalum. Tantalum is a miracle metal. It's highly resistant to heat and corrosion, and it has a unique ability to store and release an electrical charge. This makes it essential for the tiny, high-performance capacitors that are the beating heart of modern electronics. The smartphone in your pocket. It works because of tantalum capacitors. The laptop on your desk, the data centers that run the internet, and the advanced electronics in cars, cameras, and gaming consoles all rely on this mineral. And as the world pivots towards green energy, the demand for the components that use it is set to explode. The sophisticated electronics that manage power in electric vehicles, for instance, are major consumers of coltan-derived parts. The economic promise for Kenya is, on paper, staggering. The mining sector currently contributes less than 1% to the nation's GDP, but with a major mineral find, some projections suggest that could surge to 10%. With the global price of coltan fluctuating wildly, sometimes around $48 per kilogram, but recently soaring as high as $70 depending on quality and conflict, the numbers can quickly become dizzying. The government has been quick to paint a utopian picture. Cabinet Secretary Salim Mvurya spoke of attracting investors, creating jobs, and invigorating the entire mining sector for the benefit of all Kenyans. For a nation grappling with economic challenges, it sounded like a winning lottery ticket, a promise of a new dawn. But for those who have watched this story unfold elsewhere, the familiar talk sounds less like a promise and more like a warning. It's the same rhetoric that has echoed across the continent for generations, often just before the shovels of foreign companies hit the ground, and the wealth begins to flow, not into communities, but out of the country forever. For many Kenyans, this wave of government optimism is met with a healthy and deeply ingrained skepticism. They've heard these grand promises before. They've seen the cycle of hype and disappointment play out in their own backyards. This isn't Kenya's first resource rodeo, and the memories of past booms are still fresh and painful. Think of the oil discovery in Turkana. The initial excitement was immense. Headlines screamed of a new era for one of Kenya's most marginalized regions. But what followed was a slow, agonizing fizzle. The grand promises evaporated into a mist of contractual disputes, logistical nightmares, and a stark realization that the wealth was not trickling down. The local community, the people who were supposed to be the primary beneficiaries, have seen little tangible improvement in their lives. The story of other mineral reserves has followed a similar disappointing trajectory. This pattern has bred a deep-seated wariness. It's why, upon hearing of the Coltan discovery, an MP in Embu County, Nebat Muriuki, immediately urged residents not to sell their land. His plea was a direct acknowledgement of the coming storm, a storm of speculators and powerful interests who see the land not as an ancestral home, but as a commodity to be bought cheaply and exploited. This phenomenon is so common it has a name: the resource curse. It's a bitter paradox that has plagued Africa for over a century. Countries blessed with immense natural wealth often suffer from slower economic growth, more conflict, and deeper corruption than countries with fewer resources. How is this possible? The curse works in several insidious ways. First, a sudden flood of mineral money can crush other, more sustainable parts of the economy, like agriculture. Second, it creates a massive incentive for corruption. When a single resource represents a huge pot of money, the fight to control that pot becomes a zero-sum game. And third, it makes a nation vulnerable, a target for geopolitical maneuvering by more powerful nations and multinational corporations who have the capital and legal firepower to negotiate deals that are overwhelmingly in their favor. Kenyans are right to be skeptical. They've seen the opening act of this play before. The question now is whether they are destined to watch the same tragic ending. To understand the stakes, we only need to look at its neighbor, a nation that has been living the Coltan curse for decades: the Democratic Republic of Congo. To understand the danger facing Kenya, you have to look at the Democratic Republic of Congo. The DRC holds a massive share of the world's coltan, producing around 40% of the global supply in recent years. For the last quarter century, this incredible wealth hasn't brought prosperity. It has brought hell on earth. It has fueled a sprawling series of wars and rebellions, a conflict linked to the deaths of millions of people, a toll some studies, like a widely cited 2008 IRC report, have placed as high as 5.4 million since 1998. The story of the DRC is the blueprint for the resource curse. It's a chilling case study in how a nation's treasure can be systematically looted. It begins with instability. Rival militias, often tacitly supported by neighboring countries and foreign interests, wage war for control of the mining territories in the eastern DRC. They aren't fighting for ideology, they're fighting for minerals. Control a Coltan mine, and you control a source of funding to buy more weapons and expand your territory. Coltan is the definition of a conflict mineral. Into this chaos step the foreign profiteers. A shadowy network of traders, smugglers, and international corporations moves the coltan from the war-torn hills of the Congo to sterile factories in Asia. The process is a masterclass in exploitation. At the bottom are the artisanal miners, the cruisers. These are ordinary Congolese people, men, women, and tragically, many children, who risk their lives daily for a pittance. They work in horrific conditions, digging unstable tunnels deep into the earth with basic tools. Tunnel collapses are frequent and fatal. For a full day of back-breaking, dangerous labor, a miner might be paid just a few dollars. The coltan they dig is sold to local traders and smuggled across borders, often into Rwanda, where its origin is deliberately obscured. From there, it enters the global market, purchased by international smelting companies. By the time the mineral reaches the electronics giants, its connection to child labor and conflict has been conveniently laundered away. The wealth doesn't stay in the Congo. The profits are captured by corrupt officials, violent warlords, and foreign companies who turn a blind eye to the human cost. While the world benefits from its technology, the DRC remains one of the poorest countries on the planet, its people left with polluted rivers and a legacy of violence. This is the blueprint. This is the model of extraction perfected over decades. And this is the danger that now stands at Kenya's doorstep. The human cost of the Coltan curse is a visceral horror. But there is another, slower devastation that follows a mineral rush: the destruction of the natural environment. The promise of economic gain often comes at an apocalyptic price for the land itself. While we might imagine huge open-cast operations, much of the world's coltan is extracted through artisanal and small-scale mining. This is not a delicate process. It's often chaotic and unregulated. To get to the ore, miners clear vast swaths of land. Forests that have stood for centuries are bulldozed, and rich topsoil is scraped away, leaving behind a scarred, barren moonscape. In a country like Kenya, renowned for its biodiversity, the threat is existential. These forests are vital ecosystems, home to countless species and the water towers that regulate rivers providing water for millions. This deforestation leads directly to habitat loss, pushing wildlife toward extinction. In the DRC, for example, mining has devastated gorilla populations as their habitats are destroyed and they are hunted for bushmeat. The destruction doesn't stop there. The mining process itself can unleash a torrent of pollution. When exposed rock from the mine mixes with air and water, it can create acid mine drainage, a toxic runoff that leaches heavy metals into local streams and rivers, killing aquatic life and poisoning water sources. The process of separating the coltan from the rock involves washing it in rivers, which pollutes the water that communities rely on for drinking, cooking, and farming. The air itself becomes a problem. The constant digging and transport throws enormous clouds of dust into the atmosphere, which can contain toxic elements that lead to severe respiratory diseases among miners and nearby residents. This isn't theoretical. This is the documented reality in mining regions across Africa. Foreign companies arrive, extract the wealth, and leave the local population to live with the devastating environmental fallout. The profits are privatized, while the costs, the poisoned water, the barren land, the sick children, become the permanent burden of the host nation. For Kenya, the pursuit of black gold could easily lead to the destruction of its green gold, its rich natural heritage. The announcement of a major coltan find is like a dinner bell for the global mining industry. In boardrooms and government offices around the world, Kenya is now a target for investment and potentially exploitation. The game has already begun. There are three main groups of players whose interests are converging on Kenya. First, Western powers, particularly the United States and the European Union. For them, it's about geopolitics and supply chain security. The West has woken up to a terrifying reality. China dominates the global supply chain for the critical minerals needed for green energy and high-tech manufacturing. This dependency is now seen as a major security risk. As a result, there is a frantic rush to find and secure alternative sources. The US has launched initiatives like the Minerals Security Partnership, MSP, a coalition of Western allied nations aimed at securing mineral supply chains, pointedly excluding China. For the US and EU, Kenya's coltan isn't just an economic opportunity, it's a strategic asset in their new Cold War with China. Second, and perhaps the most significant player, is China. Chinese state-backed companies have been the most aggressive foreign actors in Africa's resource sectors for 2 decades. While the West debated, China built roads and ports in exchange for access to minerals. The China-Kenya relationship has been strengthening, with the two nations signing numerous bilateral agreements in 2025 covering infrastructure, energy, and technology. While coltan wasn't explicitly mentioned, these agreements create the framework for future mining deals, with officials from both countries working to finalize major financing arrangements. The concern is that Chinese companies operating in Africa have faced accusations of exploiting workers and flouting regulations. In January 2024, the Kenyan government suspended 2 Chinese mining companies for non-compliance, a stark reminder that investment doesn't always equal responsible partnership. Third, there are the multinational mining corporations from countries like Canada, Australia, and the UK. These profit-driven companies are constantly searching for the next big find. Companies like London-listed Marula Mining are already active in Kenya, explicitly targeting the battery metals often found alongside coltan. Their CEO speaks of a strategic rush from global economies to get involved. Kenya's Mining Act does have provisions meant to protect local interests, but these have been changed in the past, reflecting a government torn between protecting the nation and attracting foreign capital. The interest is already here. Officials in Embu County report that foreign investors are thirsty to venture into mining business. The stage is being set for a bidding war, and in such wars, the prize is often the resource itself, with the well-being of the local population becoming collateral damage. The future is not yet written. The story of Kenya's coltan doesn't have to end in tragedy. There is another path, a road less traveled in Africa's history of resource extraction, but one that leads towards genuine sovereignty and shared prosperity. Avoiding the curse isn't luck, it's a choice. The first and most critical step is radical transparency. The secretive backroom deals that define resource extraction in Africa are what enable corruption. Every single contract, license, and payment made by a mining company to the government must be public. Kenyans have a right to know who is mining their resources, what the terms are, and where every shilling of that revenue is going. Second is the ironclad enforcement of environmental and labor laws. Kenya has laws, but they're meaningless without enforcement. The government must fund its environmental agencies to conduct rigorous, independent impact assessments before any mining begins. These can't be rubber stamp exercises paid for by the mining companies. Similarly, labor laws must be enforced to protect miners from the slave-like conditions seen elsewhere, ensuring fair wages, safe working conditions, and an absolute ban on child labor. A special police unit to combat illegal mining is a good start, but this oversight must extend to all mining. Third, and this is the game changer, is the principle of value addition. The old colonial model is to extract raw materials from Africa and ship them elsewhere for processing. That's where the real money is made. A kilogram of raw coltan is valuable, but the tantalum powder derived from it is far more so. Kenya must break this cycle. The government should demand, as a condition of any mining license, that companies invest in processing and refining facilities inside Kenya. Building a smelter would create higher-skilled jobs, transfer technology, and capture a much larger share of the resource's final value. It's the difference between being a quarry and being an industrial nation. Fourth is ensuring direct community benefit. The wealth from the ground must be felt by the people who live on that ground. The law suggesting 20% of proceeds go to the county and 10% to the local community is a start. But the system must be transparent and robust. This can't just be cash payments that vanish. The money has to be channeled into tangible projects that communities themselves prioritize: new schools, health clinics, and clean water. Finally, Kenya has to learn from the mistakes of others. The tragedy of the DRC is not a secret. It's a well-documented warning. Leaders and citizens must study it and build firewalls to prevent those tactics from taking root. They must diversify the economy so it's not dependent on a single commodity, which would give foreign powers immense leverage. This is a difficult path, It requires resisting the temptation of easy money. It requires a government that is more accountable to its people than to foreign corporations. But it is the only path that leads away from the curse. Kenya has a monumental challenge, but also a historic opportunity to finally write a new story for Africa. A story where mineral wealth leads not to plunder, but to the genuine and lasting prosperity of its people. The fate of Kenya's black gold hangs in the balance. Will it build a nation or break it? The forces gathering to exploit this resource are powerful and organized. But they are not invincible. Their greatest fear is a public that is informed, engaged, and outraged. The story we've told today isn't just about a mineral. It's about the future of a nation and the dignity of a continent. And that's a fight that can't be won in the dark. If you believe Kenya's wealth should belong to the Kenyan people, then help bring this story into the light. Share this video. The more people who know about the coming threat, the harder it will be for those who operate in the shadows to succeed. Engage in the comments below. Discuss these issues, demand action from leaders, and support the Kenyan journalists and activists on the front lines fighting to ensure this discovery becomes a true blessing. Not the devastating curse it has been for so many others. The fight for Africa's treasure has begun. Whose side are you on?